All right, let's pray. Jesus, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity we have to share this story, and thank you that we can share the God story of you. And I think that we're just getting started. We ask you to give us grace today, Lord, to not try to be impressive, but to be helpful and to help people understand, Lord, what you've done, what you're going to do, and what we hope to do. So we love you. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And we're going to mainly look at this camera, right? Yep. Okay. All right, ready?
Hey everybody, my name is John Ware, and this is my wife Kristen, and we are super excited to be planting a brand new church in the incredible city of Newport News, Virginia, launching this September.
Look how young we look.
2017.
My husband and I, we love this area.
Babies.
We love this city. It's cultural and economic diversity. It's
What do you feel watching
concentration
this?
of military and government personnel. It's love for all things
I feel tired.
outdoors. It's small town and college town.
Feels like a
vibe,
lifetime ago.
and
Yes, it
really,
does.
it's overall
5
love for
years.
life.
In Newport News and its surrounding cities of Hampton,
But also I look at
Newtown, and Pocosin.
And I'm like, God's
they are
done it.
home to an estimated 400.
What we set out to do, what God had put on our hearts.
With 300,000 of them, according
He's
to
done
city
it.
data, claiming no religious affiliation. Kristen and I want to plant a life-giving church that helps people experience life change through Christ. Not just a church service or not just another religious experience, but a church that really helps people see the life-giving power and life change of following Christ.
One thing that we are absolutely aware of.
You know, I just know watching that, I am just overwhelmed with gratefulness and thankfulness to the many people that have helped us on this journey, but also just thankful for God's grace.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, watching this also makes me think about the first day when we launched. We had 400 and some people there. They showed up. The soundboard didn't work. Lights didn't work. We got it working right before service. What do you remember about that first day?
Just trying to get everything together, make sure all the different parts were operational and working in some form, and just amazed that people were
showed up.
pulling in the parking lot and getting out of their cars and coming into the building. I'm like, wow, this is
They were
so
coming
cool.
to a church that
Yeah.
we started.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were taught when we were training to plant a church was that your first 5 years in church planting don't even count. And what the heart behind that wasn't that they don't count, but just was that, you know, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, you're going to do a lot of dumb things, you're going to be in a learning process. So don't let the first 5 years define you. But one of the things that we saw and we experienced over this 5 years at Lifehouse is that the first 5 years counted a lot.
And this is one of the big reasons why we would love to partner with ARC to plant Lifehouse Church. We want to be a church that plants churches, and we know that the vision of ARC is to do just that. We love the fact that if we are able to, we can partner with ARC, and we'll have the opportunity to pour back into other churches and church planners through coaching and finances.
So the story of Lifehouse goes way back to when I was 18 years old, and I was needing to know what to do after high school. I went to this discipleship program named Master's Commission, and I went to a program in Hagerstown, Maryland. And while I was there, one of the responsibilities we had as a college student there was to be put with a church planter named Patrick Grash to help him start a church from scratch. Patrick had no idea what he was doing. We just had 5 college kids that we were put with him, and like, hey, help this guy plant this church. And Patrick Grash, man, what an interesting guy.
So I first met John. We had just moved to Hagerstown, Maryland to start a brand new church. And John was in a master's commission program at Bethel Assembly. And so I was partnered with Bethel Assembly. They were going to help us start this new church. We didn't even have a name for the church. And so I got partnered with a group of master's commission students. John was one of those students. And so basically their job was to be helpers to me, whatever I was doing. And look, I was making it up as I went. So like I had a team of students, we would go out knocking on doors and just interview people in the community. We had the questions. I bet to this day, John knows the questions we asked all of these neighbors. I mean, we knocked on somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 doors over a span of several weeks. And basically we were asking people, what are the needs of the community? If you were looking for a church, what would you look for in a church? And then how can we pray for you? Amazing, and had such great God moments. And so John was part of the very beginning of our church. And then one day I was trying to figure out what were we going to call this church? So I walked upstairs and there was all these master's commission students there, and I sat down with them. I was like, hey, if you guys were going to start a church, what would you call it? So we started throwing names out, and they were kind of talking, and I don't know where John says, I call it Lifehouse. And instantly I was like, yeah, that's it. That's what we're gonna call the church. So there it was. Almost 19 years ago, that was the genesis of Lifehouse Church. And so we called it Lifehouse Church. John was a part of it at the very beginning. I mean, our earliest launch phase, when we had very few people, we were just trying to reach our neighbors. Him and the rest of the team, they would come over my house. We would go through my neighborhood, just trying to tell people about Jesus. And just trying to be a church that really didn't exist in the community, a church that people who didn't want to go to church would actually want to go to.
So after we were with Patrick a couple years, and we were a part of the discipleship program, we moved on and went to be youth pastors in different places. But during those years that we were youth pastors, the Lifehouse Church in Hagerstown that we had helped start grew exponentially. They ended up becoming a church of a couple thousand people. Patrick started a church planting network. And so it was during that time that Kristen and I had felt that while we were being youth pastors, we really would love to start a church one day. And so we had kind of started that and pursuing that and dreaming of that. And when we had felt a transition in 2016 to transition from being youth pastors, God had laid Patrick back on our hearts, and we had said we need to connect with him. We see what he's doing. Maybe he would connect with us and help us launch and plant the church that is in our hearts. And so that is when we reconnected with him, and we joined the Lifehouse Church Planting Network. And in 2016, we entered into a season of training with the Lifehouse Network to start Lifehouse Newport News on September 17th, 2017. And it's crazy looking back about how God called me to Hagerstown. I remember thinking, God, why are you calling me to Hagerstown, Maryland? What in the heck is Hagerstown besides farm, right? Besides farming? And I remember going there, and it's crazy looking back and saying, now God sent me there to help a guy plant a church, not knowing that one day the church that I would help start would be the church that would help me and Kristen launch the church that God had put on our hearts. And I remember actually reading in a prayer journal that I had began my first year of this program that I was at when I was 19. I remember writing down a prayer and said, God, help me build relationships here in Hagerstown that will last a lifetime. And he did. He did it. He started relationships that we know are going to last for the rest of our lives. So it was during those years of being a youth pastor that I kind of developed this idea and heart to plant a church. And I never really realized that throughout my life, I had always started stuff. When I got saved, when I was 15, I started a Bible study, had no idea about the Bible. I just let's start a Bible study, right? When I was a part of this discipleship program, I started a school assembly program. When I was a youth pastor, I started on-campus clubs. And so I just always had this desire to start things. So when it came to church, I was like, I would love to just start a church from scratch. And so when I researched it, I was like, you can actually do this. And so I remember getting a piece of paper out, and this was when I was youth pastor and 25 years old, and I just started writing down what I thought, I thought church should be. I was reading the Bible, Acts, and I was in there, and I was just saying what should the church be? And I wrote a back and front And it was crazy, a couple years ago, I found that piece of paper from years ago, and it was crazy looking at what I had wrote down then and what Lifehouse has become. And there are so many similarities, and I didn't see that what God was putting in me then wasn't even for that time. It was for when the appointed time would come and he would, propel us to go out and launch Lifehouse Newport News.
So look what came in the mail today. Hey. Coming to a theater near you, September 17th. Hope to see you there.
Once Lifehouse opened up, it was nonstop. Yeah, it was very wild. And we were just doing our best, just trying to keep up. Yes. And we were juggling a lot, and our staff was running around. It was like everybody's hair was on fire. We had never led a church, much less a church that was growing this large and this fast. And we were seeing a lot of people show up. Lives were being changed, and we were hitting attendance records, it seemed, almost every weekend. And then we remember hearing about a disease out there that might be a problem around the world, might come our way. And that's when COVID decided to make an appearance in March of 2020.
Is reassuring. It is deep breath time.
My administration has also taken the most aggressive action in modern history to protect Americans from the coronavirus. You know about this whole thing? Horrible.
Former Vice President Joe Biden making a remarkable political comeback.
And we're told, well, when it got to Super Tuesday, it'd be over. Well, it may be over for the other guy.
We play games without the fans? Yeah. No, it's impossible. I ain't playing. I ain't got the fans in the crowd. That's what I play for.
Social distancing, and that's an aggressive measure that's taken to help contain an outbreak or slow its spread.
The Grand Princess crossing the iconic Golden Gate, 21 on board infected with coronavirus, most of them crew members.
It will go away, just stay calm, it will go away. We want to protect our shipping industry, our cruise industry.
We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Yeah, and when COVID happened, we were not our church was not online at all. Like, we had no online church. We were barely recording services on Sunday. So we as a church had to pivot and literally take our whole church and put it online, services online, groups online. And that was something that we had never done before. You also throw in there during this time of COVID, people were divided over COVID. Should we have services, masks, no mask? Are you giving it to the government? Are you not loving people well? Vaccinations. Then you also had the George Floyd incident. You had the 2020 election going on. You had all of this division going on while we're already separated as a church, and we can't gather and we can't meet. And there was no leadership book that was guiding me on how to walk through this. So honestly, myself and pastors in general were really struggling to find out, how do we lead in this season, especially leading a diverse church like Lifehouse is. It just, I always felt like I was in the middle trying to help people understand each other better and get them to focus on Jesus and the gospel and to stick together, not be divided. And it was just an absolutely challenging time to lead.
Also during this time, John and I hit a hard place in our relationship because, COVID caused this hard stop. And then you had to look at each other and realize, oh wait, who are we and what is this? And so there was just a lot of stuff that came to the surface because we were always busy, always doing our own thing, but working for God and all that sort of stuff.
And raising a family, have three boys under 5, under 6 years old. And I just think the busyness really hadn't allowed us to address some troubles, some kind of stuff between us that we had kind of just been pushing off. And not that we didn't like each other, but we didn't have the tools that we needed to get through some of the stuff that we were walking through. And I remember March, I think it was like March, at the end of March, we looked at each other, and this was in 2020, and we said, we do not have the tools that we need to get through the stuff that we're encountering with each other. And that's when we just said, we need therapy, and we need to be proactive in that. And so we sought therapy, and it was a godsend. You know, also too, I think during 2020, I realized how much I had built my identity on the church, and how my self-worth was tied into how many people were showing up on Sundays. And that's one of the occupational hazards of being a pastor, is you find your identity in what you do for God instead of who you are in God. And I realized that when I didn't see people showing up and I was preaching to a camera each week, I felt this downward spiral inside. I don't know if it was depression, what it was, but I was spiraling, and I realized I need help. So I remember pulling up Google, and I just typed in pastor's retreat, and I mean, I'm literally looking anywhere online, and I remember being led to this Google search for soul shepherding, which is a specific ministry out of California that helps pastors learn how to shepherd their own souls, and how not to be defined by what you do for God, but who you are in God. And so thankfully I got connected with them, started going out to their retreats, and that really started me on a journey of healing inward wounds and hurts and deficits. But also too, I don't think I realized how close I was to being a pastoral statistic, how close I was to burning out, and how close I was to doing something stupid. And so I'm just really glad that in His grace, mercy, that He reached down and gave me a life raft in the form of soul shepherding.
Hey, what's up, Lifehouse family? It's Pastor John here. Hope that you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited that you're with us. I'm out here on the West Coast getting my soul restored on a retreat. It's been amazing. You can actually see here the Pacific Coast, and absolutely beautiful. God's creation's amazing.
So we somewhat got through 2020, barely, barely. And 2021 came, and we always have 21 days of prayer and fasting as a church, the first thing we do in January. And it was during this 21 days that I was seeking God for, God, what do you want for our church? Because I felt like I had no vision. I mean, you know, because like I feel like the vision before 2020, it was just like, how many people can we get? And it wasn't considering what kind of disciples of Jesus are we even raising up? So I was just like, Lord, over this 21 days, I need you to speak to me about what is next for our church. And I felt like towards the very end of these 21 days, I felt the Lord say, and I say that trembling. Like I don't say, thus saith God often, but I really felt like He spoke to me, and He said, John, it's not how many, it's what kind. And as I broke that down, it's like, the whole vision of our church had just been how many people can we get to show up? How many baptisms? How many first time visits? Just how many? And it was ruining my soul. and I felt like the Lord say, there's a seismic shift coming. It's not going to be how many that you're going to focus on. It's going to be what kind. Because I felt God say, I've never needed a lot to do a lot. Not that He doesn't want His church to grow, but He's always not needed an amount of people. He's needed a certain kind of person to be His hands, to be His feet, to be His church. And that's when the Lord said, it's not how many, it's what kind. So there were two quotes that I remember reading that I think were the seeds that started this journey towards not how many, but what kind. And there were two quotes, one by C.S. Lewis and one by Neil Cole. And they were, the church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ, to make them little Christ. If they are not doing that, all the cathedrals, clergy, missions, sermons, even the Bible itself are simply a waste of time. Neil Cole said, ultimately each church will be evaluated by one thing, its disciples. Your church is only as good as its disciples. It does not matter how good your praise, preaching, programs, or property are. If your disciples are passive, needy, consumerist, and not moving in the direction of radical obedience, your church is not good.
Out of this dark season, the Lord kind of set into motion this journey towards a renewed focus for Lifehouse, a new vision. And that is that we exist to invite all people.
All people.
All people. To
Even
live.
Even us.
To live an uncommon life
Yes.
by following Jesus, by doing life together, getting in the game, and leaving a legacy.
You know, and that word uncommon is really important to us. It comes from John 10:10, where Jesus is speaking, and he says a very famous verse. He says, "I have come to give life, and life abundantly." And when you look at that word abundantly in the Greek language, another connotation of that word could also mean uncommon, extraordinary, different. And when we were praying about what kind of people do we want Lifehouse to birth, do we want Lifehouse to send out? And this word uncommon just kept ringing in our hearts, in our minds, in our spirits, that we want a church full of people that when people encounter us, they say things like, they're just a little different, they're just uncommon. Like, they really love Jesus, like they follow Jesus. He's not a genie, or he's not, you know, he's like, they follow Jesus, like they really do life together. Like, they don't treat Christianity as a spectator sport, like they get in the game. And they're living to leave a legacy, not just living for the now, but living to leave a legacy. And when we talk about how many, what kind, the what kind is uncommon. We want to invite all people to live this uncommon life that Jesus offers us.
My first visit to Lifehouse was actually from a Facebook ad. And I actually went to Lifehouse the second Sunday that Lifehouse started. And I went there, I didn't know anybody. I went with my son, and I walked in, and Carrie and Julia both walked up and gave me a hug and welcomed me. And during the first sermon, I was like, wow, this is real. This isn't fake preaching. This is what I need.
Lifehouse is loving. Lifehouse is inviting.
Love, patience, peace. I mean, Galatians, that's what Lifehouse represents.
It's improved my life, you know. And the biggest thing is it's dead on for the word of Jesus. It's dead on for taking care of the communities, taking care of each other. There's no change in any of it. We're all here as one.
Actually, before Lifehouse even launched, I was talking to John, and I began to realize that he cared a lot more about me as a man and me as a human than me as a musician or a body that could help serve and do different things. And the second one really kind of confirmed it when Clarissa and I got married and she wanted to join us there. That was, we didn't want to be split between two churches, and when she committed to come with me, that was it. That was our home church.
So yeah, I would say those groups, those life groups, where you get to share your experiences with other Christians, and you help each other along the way, because life it should not be lived alone, as Pastor John has often said. We want to live life together, and so those life groups have been just invaluable to me.
We're kingdom-minded. We want to see the kingdom on earth, and then we're community-focused. So we're reaching out to the community. We're doing work in the community. We're bringing Jesus to the community. And I think for so long, we've seen church. I grew up in church too. We've seen church do church in this building, leave, nothing changes. The community doesn't change. But being a part of a church where we really are being a part of the community is definitely how I would define Lifehouse.
I guess there's this wide range of ages and people and backgrounds, and coming from where we're coming from, it's like it's not as diverse as it is here, and that's something that we were looking for, and it's just cool. So
John and Carrie and all the other leaders have always provided a safe space for us to grow and to use our gifts.
Lifehouse is amazing. Lifehouse is accepting of all people. Lifehouse is just one big family. From the littlest kids to the oldest adults, it's just like one big family. You walk into Lifehouse, you feel like you're home. You feel like this is someplace where I can be me.
Kristen and I are so grateful for each person that we've had the opportunity to play a part in their walk with Jesus, and we're so grateful for all that God has done at Lifehouse in the past 5 years, but we are so expectant, looking forward to everything that God's going to do in the next 5 years and beyond that. And we just want to invite you to come with us on this uncommon journey. We are on this journey to become uncommon people that builds an uncommon church that leaves an uncommon mark in the 757. And we will do this as we all commit to following Jesus, doing life together, getting in the game, and leaving a legacy. Come and join us as we go on this uncommon journey together.